Okay, lovely. So kind of going off of what you were previously saying about Tech Cocktail and the initial traction that you guys received, were there any lessons that you learned in growing that traction or sustaining that traction?
So many, so many. Everything from, the earliest days when we made our very first sales and were able to start paying people and trying to figure out, again, when we started, there weren't as many SaaS products out there. There weren't as many support services. So there really, weren't many options yet when it came to how do I set up my first payroll? How do I do this? I was manually filling out spreadsheets for different states and trying to mail in payments with checks and all of that, and trying to learn how do you operationalize these things so that you are not inundated. Because very quickly, it's shocking how quickly when you start a company, if you don't understand all those things you have to do, you can become buried in it. So everything from constantly figuring out how do we operationalize this, how do we create systems, how do we create discipline, to telling your story. That's a big one, right? I was just we have a podcast, and I was just doing a little clip about that's so many people sort of think that's a small part of the equation when they start a company, because they're so focused on product market fit and scaling and hiring and all of those things. But honestly, one of the most important things you can do is learn to tell your story, because you're constantly selling yourself, whether it's to investors, press, future employees, customers, whomever it is. You are constantly selling yourself and selling your organization. So let's see, what else can I dive into with regard to lessons learned, because there were many.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a question of how you scaled, be more than just how you acquired your first 1,000 customers.
So it was really interesting. So we pivoted a few times. So when we started off, we were sort of this grassroots marketing or event organization focused on startups and focused on connecting startups with what we now call the ecosystem. So trying to find investors and press and other companies and industry folks and bringing them all together, which again sounds like every meetup on the planet then, but it wasn't then. And as we were growing and as we took some funding, the writing was on the wall that we needed to become a real media organization. And we were looking at what our clients and sort of the organizations we were working with who were paying us, what were their needs? Because it seemed to be changing. And so we really put everything into maturing into a media organization. And that was a pretty big shift. And it was just a huge mountain to climb, because if you looked at the media landscape, media is very, very challenging. You're constantly having to grow your viewership. You have a lot of competition. What advertisers care about are eyeballs, right? And we were very niche. So I guess when it comes to scaling, it was really about how do you consistently acquire new customers? How do you constantly grow that audience? While also constantly keeping your finger on the pulse of the advertising community and and how you're going to continue to grow that pipeline. So again, it gets back to discipline of organization. So we had to learn just a lot of new skills in order to keep those machines running at all times. So going from sort of very sort of haphazard, accidental revenue to trying to create a much more systemic, predictable model on both sides, actually, from a growth perspective and a revenue perspective. So those are some of the biggest lessons for us, and really trying to look at, constantly sort of checking in with ourselves about where are we going. That's sometimes you can take your eye off the ball and forget. We had a mission from the beginning that was all about our mission was to help startups. And while we were a media company, everything we did was sort of guided by that principle. And at first, we were so sort of engrossed with the events that we were doing. We kind of kept going back to that, even when the market started shifting, and it was like, wait a minute, the events aren't working anymore. That's not the revenue driver. And the markets are becoming saturated as co-working spaces open, as all these startup hubs are created. That's not the important thing anymore. How else can we serve our customer? How do we keep our eye on that ball? So it was a constant sort of checking in and saying, where are we? Where is the market? What's the landscape? Where is this going? How do we keep ourselves relevant while we continue to worry about all these other things? So as you scale, continuing to check in to see, what do I sort of need to leave behind? What's not working for us anymore? And how do we cut that so that we are constantly staying, lean and mean and relevant, if that makes sense.
No, that does make a lot of sense. Is there a new iteration that you would say is kind of what Techco is looking forward towards or moving forward towards?
So Techco was acquired in 2018. So they are now part of it's part of a large British publishing company. So I can't tell you what their current goals are, but they have I would say quite a different revenue model, which is very much based on lead generation, which is fantastic. I would say targeted lead generation is a fantastic model for that type of media. It was kind of a perfect match. So I'm sure they're very much, focused on continuing growth, but for, very targeted audience.
Yeah, that's great. I think your story is kind of similar to how fast the tech space moves in general, in which like events become a need that is fulfilled by so many competitors. And then, yes, you do have to iterate a lot.
A lot, yes. And, it can be jarring, I would say, for any startup, when all of a sudden, you start doing something that is, new and unique and special, and you're the belle of the ball, so to speak. And then before you know it, you look around and there are so many others, and you're like, what just happened? And it's so important that you don't, we were talking about identity earlier, because so much your company becomes your identity. And it's this constant of like, wait a minute, why aren't I special anymore? Wait, it's not me. It's the company. And that's what happens in markets. That's what happens in society. And that is part of your job as a leader, is to look around and say, oh, things are changing. And so therefore I need to figure out, how can I stay ahead of the curve, and how can I meet the need in a different way?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Kind of moving on from the iteration to the female founder component, I would love to know what has your experience been as a female in tech, and then also as a female founder in general, and if there are any sort of tips that you have for our female founders in the crowd, to be able to really make sure your presence is respected, and also that you're considered an equal in most of the spaces that you're setting foot into.
Great question. And as you ask that question, so many things, because, like I said, 20 plus years, a lot of things run through my mind, and just trying to think where to start. So a couple things to think about. One experience that just always jumps out at me. Let me back up by saying there were so many people who have helped me along the way in my career. And when I first started, I was very fortunate to be surrounded by people who believed in me and who were willing to give me advice that I really needed. I would say, I was confident, but still timid when I started off. I was not the first person to walk in the room and sit at the head of the table and speak my mind. I started off right out of college. Like I said, I took sort of, the jobs I could to learn everything I could, which served me well. I will say, raising your hand for new projects that come up and being bold, even if you don't feel 100% confident that you can do whatever that is, sign up, like push yourself to say yes, because it gets you in front of more people, it gives you more opportunities, and you're going to gain more confidence every time you do that. So I will say that's as a piece of advice. But I would say something that was really helpful for me as a woman in tech was having people who believed in me and who really took the time to pull me aside and give me advice, and being able to sit there and take it in and use it. So I had a great mentor, and I remember I was at a point in my career at AOL where I had risen up through the ranks. I was getting somewhere, but not as fast as my male colleagues, like just nowhere near. And it was very, very frustrating. And he knew my frustration. And so he gave me this role where there was this weekly or bi-weekly meeting with, it was all my superiors. Like I was not normally a part of that meeting. It was all like senior vice presidents. And he said, "You're going to run that meeting." And I remember thinking, like, that's impossible. These are all people who love to hear themselves talk for hours. How am I going to run that meeting? And he just said, when you walk in, you're going to sit at the head of the table. You're going to command presence, and you're just going to run it like you own it. And he actually made me practice. Sit down, like put your arms out, command the room. I'm like, I'm 5'3". I was the smallest person in the room. But things like that, people like that gave me so much confidence. And it's really important as a woman in tech to seek that out and to take advantage of anything like that you can get, because it's very helpful. There's so many places where directions I can take this, but I will say that there will always be difficult situations. It's the reality of the society we live in. Build your network. So important to have a network of trusted allies, people, whether they work with you or not, that really doesn't necessarily matter. I have, whether it's a group of friends or I have a professional women's network that's very tight. When I was at AOL, I had a great network of people there, men and women. But having those networks of people that you can go to, whether it's to vent or to figure out, hey, I'm facing this, what can I do with this in this situation? What would you do? I'm running into problems with this, whatever it is, those networks are so valuable. And it can also just make you feel safe and like you just have a trusted, warm place to go when things don't feel right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Was there ever any techniques that you employed to kind of be more aggressive, or did you ever feel like you had to be more aggressive as a woman in tech, kind of so you're taken seriously during pitches, and with a lot of other male VCs in the room?
Yeah. So a few things, because there's a tightrope that you walk as a woman, because I remember at the same time being told to speak up and and be a little bit more aggressive, and then being told, oh, you need to tone it down a little. And it's kind of like this constant, like, wait, which is it? Because you don't like me being, confident and loud, but you don't want me to be too, too small. So it can be very frustrating as a woman to find the right voice. So you got to trust yourself, you got to, and this is what I think that's for everybody who's just getting started. Sometimes you just got to go for it and then find your way and find your right place in how you deal with people. That's an interpersonal skill. And, and then you figure out different voices, different ways to command yourself in different situations. And that's something that just happens with experience. But going back to your question, I had a really great boss once who said, she pulled me aside. I was very frustrated at one point for not getting where I wanted to be. And she said, you don't advocate for yourself enough. You need to be your own biggest cheerleader. And, you're waiting for other people. You're doing all the right things. You're, all these great projects and finding all success, and you have a great reputation. She's like, but you don't advocate for yourself. You don't ask for what you want. You don't go out there and really talk about what you've done. And if you don't, no one will. No one will. No one's, maybe once in a while you'll get a little feature, but most of the time within a company, there's too many people. And the squeaky wheel really does get the oil. Like that is 100% true. So you really do have to sort of own your reputation, own yourself, your brand. Sorry, that's like your personal brand. And you have to constantly be thinking about that, just like the business. You have to think about, how do you market yourself even within your organization or within your community? So those are things that I think are important skills that sometimes it's easy to forget. Your head's down, you're focused on certain things. You don't feel like being out there, but then just don't forget that no one else is going to do it for you. So at a certain point, you have to remember to go back out there and do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great piece of advice. So kind of moving back to tech.co, or as it was known previously, Tech Cocktail, how were you and your co-founder able to secure your first investor?
So it's very interesting because we weren't really at first thinking about getting funding. We were really focused on bootstrapping. We were growing fairly well, but from a team perspective, we were doing what all good bootstrappers do and being very, conservative with our funds and only bringing people on when we could and working with a ton of freelancers, versus building up any employee base. But then we had some meetings. We were thinking about, we're considering, should we go out there and raise something? And then we had a conversation with a friend of ours at the time, Tony Shea, who's passed away. But if any of you are familiar with Tony, he was the CEO of Zappos and built the downtown project in Las Vegas. And so he invited us out there and we went out to see his vision. This is before the project had really grown. And we just started talking about what he was really great at, pushing you to think about the biggest vision you could have. And so we started talking with him and thinking about, like, how big could this be? What could we do with this company? Where could we bring it? How could we, what if we moved it to Las Vegas? And at the same time that we were building out our company, as he was trying to bring all these people to Las Vegas, all these investors and startups and other industry luminaries, how could we help what he was doing as well? And so we came up with this vision together. And we said we could do this, but we're gonna have to grow faster. Like, this is going to take more to make all this happen. And so we started the conversation, and it took, several months. Can't remember exactly how long it took us, maybe even a year, to figure it all out. But he and some other local investors came on board. And so I would say that we had a very unique experience. We've worked with thousands of startups. So I don't want to make this sound like it's that easy to just go out and get investors, because for the vast majority of companies, you usually have to pitch a lot of investors before you get a check. In this case, this was a very unique situation where he sort of pulled us in, and it made sense for us to create a partnership and to take on investment to grow. Now, at a certain point, we had decided to continue to grow, we're going to have to raise, I would say that was the seed round, we're going to have to raise more money. And then we went out and started pitching. But during that time, and we were really working on our pitch, we were flying around the country, we had found some strategic investors, we were just looking for our lead. But at the same time, that's when we were approached by a buyer, and things were heating up in the media space. And it was looking like, if we looked at all of our competitors, it looked like the amount of money that we would have to raise would be significantly more than what we had originally thought. And so the exit made sense. And it was a very good choice. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Like I said, it's a little atypical of most startup experiences, but that was our unique experience.
The ideal experience.
And all experience have pros and cons. But we were very fortunate.
To that end, are there any tips that you have for founders now who are pitching in probably this new landscape as well, over Zoom, as a VC partner yourself? What are general things that you not necessarily hone in on, but were things that on some of your Zoom calls surprised you in a good way and made you kind of either pay closer attention to their pitch or continue to follow up on the team?
Good question. So first piece of advice I'm just going to say is always take the meeting. Always take a meeting. I've seen founders who are like, oh, I don't know if that's the right fit or that's whatever, but they got a meeting. There are some startups who've turned it down. And what I say is everyone you can talk to is connected. They all have networks. I was just talking to a founder today, and she's like, I actually, know within 5 minutes that an investor is not interested. She's like, but since she's actually her business sells to startups, she's like, I get so excited because then I know that all I'm going to do for the rest of the time is try to sell him on what I can give to his portfolio companies, which was so smart. I thought, yes, of course, figure out how can you use any meeting to your advantage, right? Like, who else does this investor know? Look them up, learn something about them in advance. Know that you're not going to be the right fit for the majority of investors that you speak to, and that is okay. Use every single meeting as a learning experience. Be grateful for every single meeting. They wouldn't have taken it if they didn't think there was some reason to take it. And trust me, I have pitched to so many people in the past. If it wasn't for funding, it was for sales. And it can be really hard when someone, sometimes within a few minutes, someone might be rude. They might be a jerk. That's the nature of people. But just know that you're there for a reason to learn something from it. And maybe that's exactly what you're there to learn, is how to have grace within, while you're facing kind of a weird situation. All right. Remind me, where else can I take this? What other kind of advice? You said something that maybe a founder or someone has done that's unique.
Yeah, that surprised you, especially while pitching virtually.
Oh, let's see. Literally, I'm combing through my mind because I feel like I don't get surprised that often. I do, we like investing in people. So most of the people that I work with are really about the teams, the people behind it. We know that the concept is important, the market is important, all those things are important. But a team that is passionate, is focused, is coachable, all those things really matter. So I do like it when people let their personalities shine through. Sometimes it can be hard when someone is trying so hard to be the sort of perfect candidate that they're not as true to themselves. They don't kind of shine through. I constantly, so more than I coach so many companies, and I'm constantly trying to tell them, if you don't show something about your true self and connect that to what you're pitching and what you're doing, then I can't truly get a sense of how important this is to you. So some people get so caught up in like hitting their points that they get kind of robotic about it. And if you don't sound super jazzed and excited and like, I am truly living for this thing, like seriously, this is going to happen no matter what. I am going to stick it out. I will be the, even with Techco, we were laughing the day we sold it because we were like, overnight success, ha ha ha. Like, no, we built that company for forever. we were in there for over 10 years. So, total joke about overnight success. So anyway, long story short, I think I love it when people surprise me with little things about themselves or stories about why it was, why they started the company or why it was named the way it was, or why something that they achieved was so important to them. I think those things matter a lot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now moving on to your experience at NextGen. So how and when did you decide to start venturing into the venture space?
So I will say, so NextGen is a unique beast, and I am not the founder of it. So this amazing guy, Dan Mindus, he was a friend of ours when I was living in the DC area, and we met up at I'll never forget, this little local like cupcake shop. And he was saying, I think we need if you look at the DC market, it's an interesting place. And he said, I think we need some younger investors. And I want to start this group. I think it was called, gosh, I can't even remember the first name of it. It was like 40 angels under 40 or something like that. And the whole idea was that we would amass a group of 40 angel investors under the age of 40, and we would be super founder friendly. We would have all these regular meetings and just kind of infuse some excitement into the space in DC and get more people into the game. And it just took off. Like, I was just so excited to be part. That was really my first foray into investing. And it was really exciting to just be part of this group and come up with sort of what is our thesis? Like, what are we looking for? What are the rules of engagement for us? How are we going to manage this? And it grew so fast. And now so I'm not sure if you've looked into it at all, but now there are thousands of people involved in it. And it's a network all across the country. And it was basically acquired into Brown Advisory. So there's a whole full-time group. I'm not part of the full-time group, but we have an opportunity fund. We have several funds. It's very, very exciting. And there are some amazing, amazing companies we've been able to invest in. So it's been a thrill to be part of it.
So I just saw Jeremy has a question, so you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really helpful so far. I kind of wanted to touch upon like an earlier point that you made about like the importance of having like a team. And so I guess just what do you look for like as a founder in like building out your team and like looking for co-founders, and also if you had any advice for like meeting like potential co-founders during like COVID right now.
Let's see. So first off, with regard to co-founders, try to find people who complement your skills, right? Because if you have the exact same skills, then you're not helping each other as much. So just for full transparency, my co-founder is now also my husband. So we've built products, we've built companies, we've built funds, and we've built a family. So, and I would say that one of the reasons that we've been able to work well together has been that our skill sets complement each other very well. Sorry, they just poked, my husband and my 5-year-old just poked their heads in. So we complement each other very well, and we can actually look at a lot of different sides of things from different perspectives. And so I would say that's definitely something that you want to look for in co-founders. You know, a lot of, and just to build on that a little bit more, we all know this, right? Diversity breeds better experiences, better products, a better view of the world, surfacing more things to think about. So all those things matter. In terms of looking for co-founders during COVID times, you know, I feel like the advice is very similar to non-COVID times. It just takes a different form, which is you just got to put yourself out there. You've got to network. You've got to look for any kind of gatherings you can. You have to be bold. You know, you've got to, gosh, even when my husband, so Frank and I were trying to build a product, this was sort of between AOL and Tech Cocktail. Tech Cocktail was happening, but we were starting up a few different things, and we were trying to build a product, and we both sort of had a somewhat technical background, but we knew we couldn't build what we needed to build in any kind of quick time frame. And so we literally just started going to these meetups, these tech meetups, and all these people knew each other. We'd go, you know, walk in, there'd be a group of people all sitting around drinking beers, talking about something you could tell they'd been meeting up for months and months and months. And we'd be like, hey, we're new here. Hi, we just want to get to know everybody. And, you know, and just start infusing ourselves into these groups and getting to know people and finding out like, hey, you know, do you guys know anyone? Do you know any freelancers? Any of you looking for extra work? Are you interested in a startup? And we met a lot of people that way. And I see people every day who do those kinds of things. And, you know, there's other networking groups that are built specifically for this kind of thing, for going out there and finding people. So I'm a big fan of like, try it all, like get yourself out there, because you never know where someone might come from. Does that help?
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
I know it's not very specific, but, you know, I was talking to a woman today who she is down in Austin, Texas. And if any of you are following real estate right now, it's like cities like Austin are exploding. And she and her husband decided, we are just going to see what happens if we put our place for sale for a lot of money. Well, it sold, but then they were without a place to go. And they're like, oh no, where do we go? Like, we can't find anything for sale. And so they literally put an ad, like created a web page and put up ads saying, we're looking for a home. You know, literally trying to sell themselves, and it's working. They're getting hits. And she's like, you know, we just have to try it. Like we have to do everything we can to try to, you know, to find what we need right now. And that really stuck with me. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't you? Like, put an ad up there that says, hi, I'm seeking a house for sale. Ever thinking about selling yours? Reach out to me.
We also know how big of a tech titan you are, and I kind of wanted to pick your brain on the current tech landscape. So a lot of the AI and SaaS and data analytics startups we saw in the Innovation Fund talked about data security and compliance. I just wanted to know, like, what advice do you have for these early stage startups that are trying to tackle this complex issue?
Ooh, So advice for early stage companies that are focused on AI and what else were you saying? AI and
the data security and compliance, I think.
I don't know if I have a lot of advice except get great advisors on your side. You know, it's rapidly changing, advancing. The landscape is changing. And that's, I mean, the advice again isn't that different than a lot of other spaces, but I would definitely say you want to find some of the best people you can to be constantly advising you on how you're growing and changing. We have a company that's more on the focused on cybersecurity, but doing some very interesting things in that space. And it is an incredible, I mean, they have to raise a lot of money right now because they have to grow so fast and they have to stay on top of things. And they're doing an incredible job. They were just pitching, they're actually gonna be part of a NASA event that we're doing in the next few weeks. I'm looking for the date in mid-April. And that team is laser focused. And I think they're gonna do amazing things, but you know, I was just talking to them because they just raised their how much did they raise? I think they raised about 10 million and they're about to raise another 20 because they have to grow. So it's they've got an incredible team, incredible advisors, and I think they're going to do great things. So I'm not sure how much more advice I can give on that front.
Yeah. I would also like to divert the conversation to Brian because I saw he had a hand up.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us. I wanted to ask you something that was prompted by, I think, your story about your first foray into fundraising. And that's, as a founder who may be still kind of like working through and struggling with like whether to bootstrap or go to the table for institutional funding, what advice would you have on how best to engage VCs? Like, as you know, as a partner for a really active fund, like, are you still open to taking those calls when that founder may still be a bit unsure about their fundraising strategy?
Yeah. So and we're a little unique on the so on the established side, we have a program called Startup of the Year. So just like we did with Techco, we are so taking ourselves out of the investor hat, you know, taking off the investor hat for a moment. Our day job company connects large organizations with startups, and to build those relationships with startups, we've built this pretty massive startup community. And a big part of that is creating opportunities to get to know them and to advise them and bring in coaches and bring in mentors and things like that. And so we spend a lot of time with startups, and we're constantly advising startups to have conversations with people about that. And I think it's so important, you know, because not only are you building relationships with investors as you do that, but you're coming to the table before you have an ask for them, right? Because it's, of course, when you meet investors, you know, when you're raising, you're going to meet new investors, but it's so great to actually be able to bring in, you know, go to mentor sessions and different types of events and take meetings with investors just to learn, just to brainstorm and strategize and say, hey, this is what I'm facing right now. You know, I've been bootstrapping for 2 years, and, you know, now we have this opportunity and we think we need to grow faster. And this is our model. Like, do you think this is the right time, or should we, you know, build ourselves up with clients a little bit longer, customers a little bit longer? Like, you can get so much great advice, and investors love to do that. They really love to do that. If you look at even like a lot of accelerator programs, that's the reason so many investors become mentors for them, because they like working with startups through those challenges. So that's my biggest piece of advice there, is bring in people, go search out how can you have set like meetings, networking time with folks like that. How can you definitely, if you meet someone, say, hey, would you be open to, you know, a couple sessions, like a couple meetings where I'd like to talk through these things. We definitely had meetings with, let me back up. We did a lot of networking early on to meet investors, build relationships with them, go for coffee, hang out, get to know them. And then we were able to go to them and say, hey, we're thinking about raising, can we even like maybe show you our pitch? And a lot of times we do this with investors who we knew would never, ever invest in what we were doing. And that was even better because it was like, it took the pressure off of them. So they weren't like, yeah, they're just doing this to pitch me. It was kind of like, no, like, seriously, we know you're never going to invest. We just really need that advice. And we even had one investor who was like, yeah, let's set up like a few sessions. Like we did like 3 working sessions with him as he helped us through the process.
Thank you.
Would that be because they mainly work in a different space, or why might that be?
Why would they not invest?
Yes. Or why
Yeah.
would you be so sure? I'm curious.
Sure. So this is really important. Sorry, I don't always remember where each audience is at, but so there are thousands of investors across the country, right? When you if you look at each angel investor or venture capital firm, they invest in different things. So, for example, many investors do not invest in media companies. Many investors do not invest in biotech. There are some investors who will only invest in very specific industries. So it's really important to do your research and look at like, who are all the investors who invest in my space? If I'm an AI company and I'm looking for investment, there are only certain investors who invest in AI. There are some generalist funds, but it's really important to do your research and know upfront. So we knew upfront that a few of the VCs that we were working with would not invest in media. It just wasn't something that their portfolio was going to expand to. So, so it's really important because investors, just like everyone, get a ton of email. They're getting a huge number of inbounds every single day. And it's very frustrating to realize that somebody who sent us the pitch never looked at what we invest in. So, and again, there are some generalists, like especially at the seed stage, you can find, broader investment funds who will invest, but you want to do your homework. Likewise, sorry, my throat's getting a little sore. Likewise, not every investor writes the same size checks or invests in certain rounds. So there are some investors who invest at the seed stage, at the pre-seed stage, at the series A, B, C, D stage. And it's really important. I was speaking to this young woman who she has an idea. She created a pitch deck and she wanted to run it past me. She hasn't built anything yet, doesn't have a team, just has an idea. And she told me she set up a meeting with through a favor with one of the biggest VC firms in Silicon Valley. And I happen to know the investor, and he's working on like Series B companies. And I'm like, I just want you to know, like, he's not going to write you a check. And it's really important for you to understand that going in and do your homework, because you don't want to waste your time. There's so much work to do to go out and find all the right investors for you. Don't waste your time sending your deck to a bunch of people who aren't relevant for you. Does that help?
That does. Thank you for clarifying.
So we're almost nearing the end of our time. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. I also wanted to ask, like, during this time of the pandemic, there's been a lot of trends within networking itself that I think has changed. What kind of things do you see that maybe we lost before the pandemic that you really would emphasize people do to network? And also, how, if someone had a question that, or they wanted to contact you, what would be the best way?
Let me start with the last part. So if someone wanted to contact me, few things, Twitter, LinkedIn, even it's so funny because I've been on Clubhouse now for a little while, and Clubhouse is driving more Instagram as well. So I'm getting, the other day I looked, I didn't even realize I had like 15 different people who had sent me messages through Instagram, which I just wasn't used to. So I'm pretty accessible. I'm email jen@est.us. You can always email me directly. So I'm pretty easy to get in touch with, but I do get a lot of emails, so I'm not always fast at responding, as Melissa can attest to. And your first question was, what things pre-COVID did people do that we should continue? I'm not sure exactly what you were asking.
Or how have you seen like networking itself kind of change over the years? What do you see as the future, like especially for NextGen? It says network driven first in the VC. I'm just curious what you think about that.
Well, so for NextGen, the power of NextGen, that was one of our early tenets as an organization, was that the power of the VC network itself, the investor network, would be one of our biggest assets. Meaning, even if you were a venture partner and didn't always have checks to write, because at the time we were writing individual checks versus a collective check, that by being part of the network, you were still willing to open up your Rolodex, that you were still willing to make all the introductions you could and be as helpful to founders as you could be. And I love that, because you're not going to write a check to every company, but I still want to help every company. I still want to help in any way I can. And if there's someone I can, introduce you to, or if I can have a conversation with you and help you in some way, I want to do that. So that was the genesis of that. But in terms of networking and connecting, I think the lack of meetups has been a big shift for people. And I don't know, it's a little hard for me to see right now how many things are happening. So for example, I spent a lot of time in DC. I lived there for 20 years. And one of the most amazing things about DC was we had started this thing called, my husband actually was one of the co-founders of the DC Tech Meetup. It was huge. Like we had like 1,000 people registered for that thing. Like people would get together on a regular basis. We would showcase startups, we would have speakers, etc. And a whole bunch of other networking things. Like any given week, there was some kind of meetup like that. And just being willing to go, even if it was outside of your comfort zone, being willing to show up and just meet one or two new people, it's so important. I can't express how important the network is. And people who you might think are unlikely to be an important part of your network, it doesn't matter. You need to just go out, and every time you're out, make it a goal to meet one or two new people, because you never know where people will end up. You never know what you might need that they might have. Everyone is sort of a piece of this invisible puzzle that we don't understand until we're in that position. It was like, oh my gosh, I never dreamed that could have gone there. Little did I know, just going back to Tony, when I met him so many years ago, and Frank met him even before then at a party, never imagined in our wildest dreams how central he would become in our lives. So it's just, you got to open yourself up. And even with COVID, I think right now we've lost so many of those meetups. I'm pretty sure when the floodgates open, they're all going to come back. And I really hope they do. I hope anyone who's feeling like they're missing something, go out and start it. If you don't see what you need out there, start it. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Excuse me. Because it really, it can change your entire trajectory.
Thank you so much, Jen. We are over time, but it is always lovely to have a speaker who is willing to stay over time for us. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and all the powerful things that you had to say about the power of networking, the power of taking every opportunity as a learning opportunity. And yes, we are very lucky to have you within our network.
Oh, thank you. Yes, any of you want to reach out, please do. And I'm sorry, my throat's giving out.
We are going to